My name is Taylor Rokas. My passage is Dickens' The Old Curiosity Shop, Chapter 6. In this chapter, Nell is given a note from her grandfather to give to Mr. Quilp, who both terrifies and amuses her. As Mr. Quilp is reading this note, he becomes extremely agitated. He then proceeds to ask Nell if she knows the contents of this letter, to which she denies. As he is asking her and waiting for her response, he looks at her with a keen eye and appreciates her beauty. He then proceeds to ask Nell if she would like to become his second wife once his first one dies. Nell is extremely frightened by this prospect and is unsure of what to say. Mr. Quilp takes extreme delight in this. He then proceeds to tell her that she must travel with him to his house and meet his wife before she may have his answer. As they are leaving, they run into two boys engaged in a fight, one of them being an employee of Mr. Quilp and the other being Kit, Nell's friend. Nell then begs Mr. Quilp to break up the fight. Once the fight is broken up, Kit explains that the fight began because the boy told Kit that Nell was ugly and had to do whatever Mr. Quilp said. Mr. Quilp then tells Kit to always tell the truth and gives him a sixpence, while sending the other boy to lock the counting house and then punishes him. Chapter 6. Little Nell stood timidly by, with her eyes raised to the countenance of Mr. Quilp as he read the letter, plainly showing by her looks that while she entertained some fear and distress of the little man, she was much inclined to laugh at his uncouth appearance and grotesque attitude. And yet there was visible on the part of the child a painful anxiety for his reply, and a consciousness of his power to render it disagreeable or distressing, which was strongly at variance with this impulse and restrained it more effectually than she could have possibly done by any efforts of her own. That Mr. Quilp was perplexed himself, and that in no small degree by the contents of the letter, was sufficiently obvious. Before he had gotten through the first 2 or 3 lines, he began to open his eyes very wide and to frown most horribly. The next 2 or 3 caused him to scratch his head in an uncommonly vicious manner, and when he came to the conclusion he gave a long dismissal whistle, indicative of surprise and dismay. After folding and laying it down beside him, he bit the nails of all his 10 fingers with extreme voracity, and taking it up sharply, spread it again. The second perusal was to all appearance as unsatisfactory as the first, and plunged him into a profound reverie, from which he awakened to another assault upon his nails, and a long stare at the child, who with her eyes turned towards the ground awaited his further pleasure. "Hello, here," he said at length, in a voice and with suddenness which made the child start as though a gun had been fired off at her ear. "Nellie!" "Yes, sir." "Do you know what's in the side of this letter, Nell?" "No, sir." "Are you sure, quite certain, upon your soul?" "Quite sure, sir." "Do you wish you may die if you did know?" "Hey?" said the dwarf. "Indeed, I don't know," replied the child. "Well," muttered Quilp, as he marked her earnest look, "I believe you. Humph! Gone already! Gone in 24 hours! What the devil has he done with it? That's the mystery." This reflection set him scratching his head and biting his nails once more. While he was thus employed, his features gradually relaxed into what was with him a cheerful smile, but which in any other man would have been found a ghastly grin of pain, and when the child looked up again, she found that he was regarding her with extraordinary favor and complacency. "You look very pretty today, Nellie. Charmingly pretty. Are you tired, Nellie?" "No, sir. I'm in a hurry to get back, for he'll be anxious while I'm away." "There's no hurry, Nell." "No hurry at all," said Quilp. "How should you like to be my number 2, Nellie?" "To be what, sir?" "My number 2, Nellie. My second. My Mrs. Quilp," said the dwarf. The child looked frightened, but seemed not to understand him, which Mr. Quilp, observing, hastened to explain his meaning more distinctly. "To be Mrs. Quilp the second." "When Mrs. Quilp the first was dead, sweet Nell," wrinkling his eyes and lowering her towards him with his bent forefinger. "To be my wife, my little cherry-cheeked, red-lipped wife. Say that Mrs. Quilp lives 5 years, only 4. You'll just be proper age for me. Ha ha! Be a good girl now, a very good girl, and see if one of these days you don't become Mrs. Quilp of Tower Hill." So far from being sustained and stimulated by this delightful prospect, the child shrank from him in great agitation, and trembled violently. Mr. Quilp, either because frightening anybody afforded him a constitutional delight, or because it was pleasant to contemplate the death of Mrs. Quilp No. 1, and the elevation of Mrs. Quilp No. 2 to her post and title, or because he was determined for purposes of his own to be agreeable and good humoured at that particular time, only laughed and feigned to take no heed of her alarm. "You shall come with me to Tower Hill, and see Mrs. Quilp, that is, directly," said the dwarf. "She is very fond of you now, though not so fond as I am. You shall come home with me." "I must go back indeed," said the child. "You told me to return directly I had to answer." "But you haven't it, Nellie," returned the dwarf, "and won't have it, and can't have it, until I have been home. So you see that to do your errand, you must go with me. Reach me yonder hat, my dear, and we'll go directly." With that, Mr. Quilp suffered himself to roll gradually off the desk, until his short legs touched the ground, when he got upon them and led the way from the counting-house to the wharf outside. When the first objects that presented themselves were a boy who had stood on his head, another young gentleman of his own stature, rolling in the mud together, walked in a tight embrace, and cuffing each other with mutual heartiness. "It's Kit!" cried Nellie, clasping her hands. "Poor Kit, who came with me! Oh, pray stop them, Mr. Quilp." "I'll stop 'em," cried Mr. Quilp, diving into the little counting-house and returning with a thick stick. "I'll stop 'em. Now, my boys, fight away. I'll fight you both. I'll take you both. Both together. Both together." With which defiances the dwarf flourished his cudgel and danced around the combatants, and treading upon them and skipping over them, in a kind of frenzy, laid about him, now on one and now on the other, in a most desperate manner, always aiming at their heads and dealing such blows as none but the veriest little savage would have inflicted. This being warmer work than they had calculated upon, speedily cooled the courage of the belligerents, who scrambled to their feet and called for quarter. "I'll beat you to a pulp, you dogs," said Mr. Quilp, vainly endeavouring to get near either of them for a parting blow. "I'll bruise you till you're copper-coloured. I'll rake your faces till you haven't a profile between you, I will." "Come, you drop that stick, or it'll be worse for you," said his boy, dodging around him and watching an opportunity to rush in. "You drop that stick. Come a little nearer, and I'll drop it on your skull, you dog," said Quilp with gleaming eyes. "And a little nearer yet." But the boy declined the invitation with his master, and waited apparently a little off his guard, when he darted in, and seizing the weapon, tried to wrest it from his grasp. Quilp, who was as strong as a lion, easily kept his hold until the boy was tugging at it with his utmost power, when he suddenly let it go, and sent him reeling backwards, so that he fell violently upon his head. The success of his maneuver tickled Mr. Quilp beyond description, and he laughed and stamped upon the ground at a most irresistible jest. "Never mind," said the boy, nodding his head and rubbing it at the same time. "You see if I ever offer to strike anybody again, because they say you're an uglier dwarf that can be seen anywheres for a penny, that's all." "Do you mean to say I'm not, you dog?" returned Quilp. "No," retorted the boy. "Then what do you fight on my wharf for, you villain?" said Quilp. "Because he said so," replied the boy, pointing at Kit. "Not because you ain't." "Then why did he say," bawled Kit, "that Miss Nellie was ugly, and that she and my master was obliged to do whatever his master liked? Why did he say that?" "He said that because he is a fool, and you said what you did because you're very wise and clever, almost too clever to live unless you're very careful of yourself, Kit," said Quilp, with great suavity in his manner, but still more of quiet malice in his eyes and mouth. "Here's 6 pence for you, Kit. Always speak the truth. At all times, Kit, speak the truth. Lock the counting house, you dog, and bring me the key."